Amelia grew up hearing laughter where encouragement should have been. In her parents' small living room, comparisons were a daily ritual, always in favor of her older sister, Eleanor, whose marble floored house and perfect life became the family benchmark. Amelia, quieter and stubbornly independent, was dismissed as unrealistic, especially the night her parents laughed and said, "You'll never have a house like your sister's." She didn't argue, she didn't cry. She carried those words with her for years, until the day everything turned and the same people who doubted her stood speechless at her front door. Amelia's childhood was shaped less by what she lacked and more by what she was constantly compared to. In her parents' home, love was not withheld, but it was conditional, quietly rationed through achievement and appearances. Her father, Robert, believed deeply in visible success, the kind that neighbors noticed, relatives admired, and photographs captured. From a young age, Amelia understood that worth in their household was measured against a single standard, and that standard was her older sister, Eleanor. Eleanor was everything the family liked to point to with pride: confident, polished, decisive, and always one step ahead. When Eleanor excelled, the house felt brighter. When Amelia struggled or moved at her own pace, the room grew quieter, heavier, as if patience itself had limits. Family conversations rarely belonged to Amelia for long. If she talked about a goal, Eleanor's achievements were brought in as comparison, not encouragement. When Amelia mentioned dreams that didn't follow the usual script, Robert would smile politely and redirect the discussion toward Eleanor's milestones: her promotions, her marriage, her plans to build a beautiful house in a gated community. Amelia learned early that ambition was only respected when it looked familiar. Anything slower, softer, or uncertain was treated like a phase she would eventually grow out of, even though it was the truest version of herself she knew. The laughter that stayed with Amelia for years came during what was supposed to be a casual evening. Eleanor had just bought her house, a place that quickly became the family's pride. Photos were passed around, compliments stacked on top of one another, and Amelia listened quietly, happy for her sister, but already bracing herself. When the conversation turned to her, it was less a question and more an assumption. Robert joked about how Amelia was still figuring things out, how she was different. And then came the words wrapped in humor but sharpened by certainty. "You'll never have a house like your sister's." The room laughed, not cruelly, not loudly, but enough for the message to settle deep. What hurt Amelia most wasn't the comparison, it was the finality of it. The way her future was spoken about as if it were already decided, already limited, already known. No one asked what kind of house she wanted or what kind of life she imagined building. It was assumed that if it didn't resemble Eleanor's, it wasn't worth envisioning. Amelia smiled that night, nodded, and excused herself early, carrying the echo of that laughter with her like a quiet verdict she had no chance to appeal. From that point on, every family gathering reinforced the same narrative. Eleanor's house became a symbol, not just of success, but of belonging. It was where holidays were hosted, where photos were taken, where approval naturally gathered. Amelia felt like a visitor in her own family story, present but peripheral, loved but underestimated. Robert wasn't unkind, but his belief system was rigid, and Eleanor fit neatly inside it. Amelia existed just outside the frame, always one explanation away from being understood, but never quite invited to explain. Over time, Amelia stopped defending herself. She learned that explaining her dreams only gave them opportunities to be minimized, reshaped, or compared into something smaller. The house of comparisons wasn't just a place she lived in growing up. It was a mindset that followed her, whispering doubts during quiet moments, reminding her of laughter disguised as truth, shaping how she learned to keep her hopes private, her plans unnamed, and her progress invisible, choosing instead to grow in silence where no one could interrupt the becoming with expectations she never agreed to accept. After years of being measured against Eleanor's life, Amelia learned that resistance didn't always look like confrontation. It looked like restraint. She stopped reacting to comments that reduced her to still finding her way and stopped correcting assumptions about her choices. To her parents, especially Robert, her silence appeared like uncertainty, maybe even weakness. What they never understood was that Amelia wasn't unsure. She was deliberate. She had realized early that arguing for her worth only kept her trapped inside their definition of success, and she wanted no part of that cage. Amelia's resolve formed slowly, shaped by disappointment rather than defiance. Each comparison carved something out of her, but it also created space. Space where she could decide who she wanted to be without an audience. While Eleanor moved quickly, chasing milestones that impressed others, Amelia moved inward. She questioned what stability meant to her, what kind of life felt honest rather than impressive. She chose paths that didn't offer immediate proof, paths that required patience and long stretches of invisibility. And that choice often left her alone with her doubts, but also free from expectations she never asked for. Her father noticed her quietness and mistook it for drifting. He offered advice she didn't ask for, suggestions framed as concern, all pointing back to Eleanor's example. Amelia listened respectfully, nodded when expected, but inside she was building something far more stubborn than rebellion. She worked jobs that didn't come with titles worth mentioning at family dinners, learned skills that didn't sound glamorous, and made decisions that looked small to everyone else but felt foundational to her. Every late night, every moment of uncertainty reinforced her belief that slow progress was still progress, even if no one applauded it. There were moments when the weight of comparison nearly broke her resolve. Nights when she scrolled through photos of Eleanor's home, glowing with approval and validation, and wondered if choosing differently meant choosing wrongly. But even in those moments, Amelia felt an underlying certainty that she was building towards something that would last longer than admiration. She wasn't chasing a finish line someone else had drawn. She was designing her own, even if she couldn't yet see its shape clearly. Amelia learned to celebrate quietly. Small wins, paying off a debt, learning something new, saying no when it mattered, became private victories she didn't share. She understood that the more she revealed, the more it would be filtered through comparison. So she protected her progress by keeping it unseen. Her resolve was not loud or dramatic. It was steady, practiced daily through discipline and self-trust. Each step she took without validation strengthened her independence, teaching her that belief in herself had to come before recognition from anyone else. Over time, the laughter that once haunted her transformed into something else. Not motivation fueled by anger, but clarity fueled by choice. Amelia no longer wanted to prove them wrong. She wanted to prove herself right. She didn't need her parents to believe in her vision for it to be real. What mattered was that she kept moving forward, grounded in her own values, committed to a future she was shaping quietly, intentionally, and without asking permission from a family that had already decided what they thought she could never become. Amelia met Noah during a season of her life when she had stopped explaining herself to anyone. She wasn't searching for validation or rescue. She was simply moving through her days with quiet determination, focused on surviving one step at a time. Noah entered her life without fanfare, without grand gestures or promises that needed to be proven. What drew Amelia to him was not what he said about the future, but how he listened to the present. He didn't interrupt her silences or try to fill them with advice. He noticed the pauses, the hesitations, the way she weighed words before releasing them, and he treated those moments with respect rather than impatience. Unlike her family, Noah never asked Amelia to measure herself against anyone else. He didn't want to know how her life compared to her sister's or how fast she planned to reach certain milestones. He wanted to know how she felt when she woke up in the morning, what made her tired in ways sleep couldn't fix, what kind of life felt honest to her even if it looked unimpressive on the outside. That kind of attention unsettled Amelia at first. She was used to being evaluated, not understood. With Noah, she didn't have to justify her pace or translate her dreams into something more respectable. Their relationship grew in quiet spaces, long conversations that didn't lead to conclusions, shared routines that felt grounding rather than restrictive, and mutual support that didn't come with expectations attached. Noah believed in building slowly, not because he lacked ambition, but because he valued intention over speed. He saw Amelia's careful nature as strength, not hesitation. When she spoke about wanting stability instead of spectacle, peace instead of applause, he didn't challenge her vision. He aligned with it. For the first time in her life, Amelia experienced encouragement without pressure. Noah never pushed her to be more visible or impressive. He celebrated her progress without needing to announce it to anyone else. When doubt crept in, he didn't dismiss it or try to overpower it with optimism. He sat with her in it, reminding her gently of how far she had already come, even if no one else was keeping score. That steady presence began to undo years of conditional approval that Amelia had internalized without realizing it. Love for Amelia became something entirely new. It wasn't a reward for achievement or a response to success. It was constant, unshaken by slow seasons or uncertain outcomes. With Noah, she learned that partnership didn't mean comparison or competition. It meant choosing each other daily, even when the path forward wasn't clear. Together, they started imagining a future not defined by what others admired, but by what felt sustainable and true to who they were. As their lives intertwined, Amelia realized that Noah wasn't just walking beside her, he was reinforcing her belief that the life she was building had value long before it had visible results. In a world where she had always been told she was behind, he made her feel exactly where she needed to be, growing at her own pace, grounded in trust, and supported by a love that didn't ask her to become anything other than herself. Choosing a path that didn't mirror Eleanor's came with a price Amelia hadn't fully anticipated. While her family assumed she was simply moving slower, the truth was that she was carrying a weight they never saw. Doing things differently meant uncertainty became a constant companion. There were no clear milestones to reassure her, no visible markers that told others she was on the right track. Each decision required faith in herself, something she was still learning to practice after years of being doubted. The absence of approval didn't just hurt, it forced her to confront her own fears without the comfort of external validation. Financial strain was one of the quiet sacrifices she rarely spoke about. Amelia and Noah lived carefully, measuring choices against long-term stability rather than short-term comfort. While Eleanor hosted gatherings in her spacious home, Amelia learned how to stretch resources, how to delay gratification, how to prioritize what truly mattered. There were moments when she questioned whether the struggle was worth it, especially when family conversations circled back to how settled Eleanor was and how Amelia was still working towards something. Those words followed her into sleepless nights, echoing just loudly enough to make her wonder if she was being stubborn rather than strategic. The hardest cost, however, was emotional. Watching her family praise Eleanor's life while barely acknowledging her own efforts created a quiet grief Amelia didn't know how to name. She loved her sister and didn't resent her success, yet she couldn't ignore how invisible she felt standing beside it. Each holiday, each visit to Eleanor's home reinforced the idea that success had a specific look, and that Amelia's life, still unfolding, didn't qualify. She learned to smile through it, to deflect questions, to protect her heart by keeping her struggles private. Noah saw the toll it took on her, even when she tried to hide it. He noticed how her shoulders tensed after family gatherings, how she grew quieter when comparisons resurfaced. He reminded her that the cost of doing things differently didn't mean the choice was wrong. It meant it was demanding. Still, reassurance didn't erase the exhaustion. Building something meaningful without applause required resilience she didn't always feel she possessed, especially on days when progress felt invisible and the future uncertain. There were times Amelia imagined what life might have been like if she had chosen the easier route, if she had followed the same blueprint as her sister, collected the same approval, and avoided the strain altogether. But even in those moments, something inside her resisted the idea. She knew that comfort gained through imitation would come at the expense of authenticity. The cost of doing it differently was heavy, but the cost of betraying herself felt heavier. Each challenge, each sacrifice quietly strengthened her resolve, reinforcing the belief that a life built on her own terms, even slowly, even painfully, was worth enduring the distance, the doubt, and the loneliness that came with it. The decision to invite her family over was not impulsive, nor was it fueled by the desire to prove anything. Amelia arrived at it gradually after years of learning how to stand comfortably in her own choices. By the time she mentioned it, her voice was calm, almost casual, as if she were suggesting an ordinary visit rather than opening a door to everything she had built in silence. She didn't announce it with pride or frame it as an achievement. She simply said they should come by sometime and left the invitation there, unadorned and unprotected. Her parents' reaction was polite but restrained. Robert responded with mild interest, already forming expectations shaped by habit rather than curiosity. He assumed Amelia's place would be modest, temporary, something she and Noah were working toward improving. Eleanor accepted the invitation with a warm smile that carried no concern, confident in the unspoken hierarchy that had always existed between them. No one asked questions, no one expressed excitement. Their indifference confirmed what Amelia already knew. They were coming out of obligation, not anticipation. In the days leading up to the visit, Amelia felt a quiet tension she hadn't expected. Not fear, but awareness. Every detail of her home represented years of deliberate choices, sacrifices, and moments of doubt that had never been explained to her family. She resisted the urge to over-prepare, to justify or decorate for approval. No one noticed her restlessness and reminded her gently that the invitation wasn't a performance. It was an opening. Whatever they saw, whatever they thought, didn't need to be managed. When the day arrived, Amelia moved through her space differently. She noticed the way the light settled into the rooms, how each corner held intention rather than excess. This home wasn't built to impress. It was built to hold their lives. It carried no echoes of comparison, no borrowed ideas meant to resemble someone else's success. For the first time, Amelia felt grounded enough to let others see it without needing their response to validate it. As her family's arrival grew closer, memories surfaced. Laughter, assumptions, dismissive comments framed as humor. Amelia acknowledged them without letting them steer her emotions. She wasn't inviting them into her home to settle old scores. She was inviting them because this place existed, because it was real, because hiding it no longer served her. Whatever happened next would unfold without her interference. When Robert's car pulled into the driveway and Eleanor stepped out beside him, Amelia stood at the door beside Noah, not rehearsing explanations, not bracing for judgment. She had already crossed the hardest distance, the one between who her family believed she would be and who she had quietly become, and all that remained was to open the door and allow the truth of her life to speak for itself. Amelia opened the door without ceremony, without the practiced smile she used to wear at family gatherings, and without the instinct to shrink herself in anticipation of judgment. As her parents and Eleanor stepped inside, the shift was immediate, not dramatic, but unmistakable. Their eyes moved slowly, taking in the space, the balance, the quiet confidence of a home that didn't announce itself loudly, yet felt complete. This wasn't the kind of house that begged for admiration through excess. It carried a sense of permanence that came from intention rather than display, and that difference unsettled them more than any grand reveal could have. Robert's usual commentary didn't arrive on schedule. He walked through the rooms with measured steps, pausing longer than necessary, as if searching for something familiar to anchor his understanding. What he found instead was evidence of discipline, patience, and choices made with care. The structure told a story he hadn't been invited into before, a story of steady progress, of long-term thinking, of values that didn't revolve around comparison. For the first time, he was confronted with the reality that Amelia's silence had never meant stagnation, and that her refusal to explain herself had been a form of confidence he hadn't recognized. Eleanor's reaction was quieter, but no less revealing. She smiled, nodded, offered polite compliments, yet something shifted behind her composure. This home didn't compete with hers, and that was precisely what made it disarming. Amelia's space existed outside the framework Eleanor had always been placed at the center of. It wasn't better or worse, it was independent. The absence of comparison left Eleanor momentarily unsure of where she stood, forcing her to see her sister not as someone behind her, but as someone simply walking a different road. As they moved through the house, Amelia didn't narrate her journey or point out sacrifices. She answered questions when asked, briefly and honestly, without the urgency to justify. Noah remained beside her, steady and present, a quiet reminder that this life had been built through partnership rather than approval. Amelia felt no rush to fill the silence that followed their observations. She allowed it to exist, knowing that the truth of her choices didn't require explanation. What surprised Amelia most was not their reaction, but her own. She felt no triumph, no urge to revisit old wounds or reclaim dignity through acknowledgement. Standing in the life she had built, she realized that the laughter that once defined her in her family's eyes no longer had power over her. This home, this stability, this version of herself had been formed without permission, without validation, and without comparison. And in that moment, Amelia understood that she didn't need her parents to recognize her success for it to be real, because she was already standing firmly inside it, grounded, complete, and finally untouched by the expectations that once tried to define her.